So yeah, we all noted, right, that I did move the due date for the paper to give you all a little extra time, since I don't need to get that grade in desperately for midterm, right? So you'll have till Thursday, and I want everybody to remember too that you can get extra credit by going to the Writing Center. Now, does everybody know how to make an appointment with the Writing Center? Or is that something that would be a good idea to go over? Okay. So yeah, let's just take a minute, and I'll show you how to make an appointment. Right, because you will get half a letter grade of extra credit if you go to the Writing Center, right? So let's just quickly call up the GSW website and wait, as we always do, for the damn projector to start working. The Writing Center doesn't take walk-ins anymore. Everything's by appointment now, so. But it's not hard to make an appointment. So the first thing you want to do, you go to the university website, and if you scroll over the Academics tab here, you'll see under Academic Resources, there's a link to the Writing Center, right? So click that. It'll take you to the Writing Center page. I don't know why everything has to open in a new tab with this new website, but it does, which is mildly annoying. Scroll down to Make an Appointment. Click on the blue box that says Schedule an Appointment. Now, if you have not been to the Writing Center before, you will have to register for an account. So we just click that happy little link, and it'll ask you to fill in all this information, right? Once you do, your account is created, and then you just log in with your email address and the password you chose, and then you will be able to schedule an appointment. But yeah, if you go to the Writing Center, I just want to remind everybody again, half a letter grade's extra credit, right? So, it's worth it, right? Turn that C+ into a B-, right?
So what do they do?
Well, what you will need to do is bring your paper, any feedback you've gotten on it so far, and the assignment sheet to them. And they'll work with you to find ways to improve what you've got, right? Whether it's helping you interpret the feedback or helping you come up with a stronger thesis, right? There's all kinds of things they can do at any stage of paper writing, right? So even before you've started writing a paper, if you just want to go talk through ideas with somebody, they can do that with you. Now, this is at a fairly late stage of the paper, right? You're just revising a draft you already have and trying to add a little bit more to it. But yeah, they can help you at any stage of paper writing. Okay. Any other questions?
Where is the Writing Center?
Okay, the Writing Center is in the library. If you walk in and just go all the way back and to the left, right? It's to the left of that it's to the left of that computer bank in the back of the first floor of the library. Anything else? Okay. Then here is what I want you all to do. All right, so I want you to assume that you have been issued the following proclamation here, right? Be it known that one Gorgias, a teacher of rhetoric, late of Sicily, hath been accused by Socrates of promoting false doctrines and presenting a danger to our state. How do you, the citizens, find? Is Gorgias guilty, or shall he walk free? So I want you to, I guess all four of you will be working together here, right? Because I need groups of 3 and only 4 people showed up. So what you're going to do is assign one of the following roles to each member of the group, right? So one person will be the scribe, right? Will take notes and write out your findings. One person will be the spokesperson, right? They will deliver the verdicts and recite the evidence for said verdict. And The third person will be the advocatus diaboli. Can anybody translate the Latin there?
Devil's advocate.
Yes, very good, James. So, the job of the devil's advocate will be to try to present contrary evidence to the findings of the group, right? So if the general group finding is, say, that Gorgias is guilty, right, then it's the job of the devil's advocate to find evidence that he's innocent and to try to sway the group in that direction, right? Present all the best evidence for the counterclaim that you can. And to help with that, so you've already got the piece in the book, right? And I'm going to give you all an example of Gorgias' own writing as well. In fact, the only example of Gorgias' writing that we have that has kind of survived the ravages of history. So this piece is called the Encomium of Helen. An encomium in Greek is a speech in praise of. And essentially what Gorgias is doing here is making an argument as to why the mythical character Helen should not be blamed for the Trojan War. But what this piece does do is demonstrate some of Gorgias's beliefs about the power of language. Right, so go ahead, gather up, decide who's going to do what, and go through these two texts together and see what you can determine about whether or not Gorgias is a danger to the state.
So what should the fourth person do?
Help find evidence, basically. That
Just like come up with ideas.
yeah, you'll all be going through the texts together, right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah, try to pull some stuff from the Gorgias piece I gave you. So the Gorgias piece that I gave you is short.
You want to read that one first? Like out loud? First?
I'll read the first paragraph. Gorgias was born in Leontini in Sicily.
Oh, but yeah, you should probably just go right to this part. Just the part that starts with the Encomium of Helen. Right? That's the part that Gorgias actually wrote.
What is becoming to a city is manpower, to a body beauty, to a soul wisdom, to an action virtue, to a speech truth. To the opposites of these are unbecoming. Man and woman and speech and deed and city and object should be honored with praise, if praiseworthy, and incur blame, if unworthy, for it is an equal error, a mistake to blame the praisable and to praise the blameable. It is the duty of one and the same man both to speak the needful rightly and to refute the unrightfully spoken. Thus is the right to refute. Thus who rebuke Helen, a woman about whom the testimony of inspired poets have become unvocal and unanimous, as had the ill omen of her name, which has become a reminder of misfortunes. For my part, by introducing some reasoning into my speech, I wish to free the accused of blame, and having reproved her detractors as prevaricators and prove the truth to free her from their ignorance. Now it is not clear, not even to a few, that in nature and in the blood, the woman who is subject to this speech is preeminent among preeminent men and women, for this is clear that her mother was Leda, and her father was in fact a god, Zeus, but allegedly a mortal
Tindarius,
of whom the former has shown to be her father, because he was the latter has disproved, because he was said to be and the only one was most powerful of men and the other of the Lord of all. Born for such stock, she had godlike beauty, which taking and not mistaking she kept. In many she did work, much desire for her love, and her one body was cause of bringing together many bodies of men, thinking great thoughts for great goals, of whom some had greatness of wealth, some the glory of ancient nobility, some the vigor. Is that vigor?
vigor. Yep.
Vigor of personal agility, some command of acquired knowledge, and all came because of a passion which loved to conquer, and a love of honor which was unconquered. Who it was and why, how he sailed away, taking Ellen as his love. I shall not say to tell the knowing what they know shows it is right, but brings no delight. Having now gone beyond the time once set for my speech, I shall go on the beginning of my future speech, and I shall set forth the causes through which it was likely that Helen's voyage to Troy should take place.
I'll read a couple for you.
Yep. Yeah. Don't make Brandon read the whole thing himself.
For either by will of fate and decision of what the gods and vote of necessity did she do what she did, or by force reduced, or by words seduced, or by love possessed. Now if through the first it is right for the responsible one to be held responsible, for God's predetermination cannot be hindered by human premeditation. For it is the nature of things not for the strong to be hindered by the weak, but for the weaker to be ruled and drawn by the stronger, and for the stronger to lead and the weaker to follow. God is a stronger force than man in might and in wit and in other ways. If then one must place blame on fate and on a God, one must free Helen from disgrace. But if she was raped by violence and allegedly assaulted and unjustly insulted, it is clear that the raper, as the insulter, did the wronging, and the raped, as the insulted, did the suffering. It is right then for the barbarian who undertook a barbaric undertaking in word and law and deed to meet with blame in word, exclusion in law, and punishment in deed. And surely it is proper for a woman raped and robbed of her country and deprived of her friends to be pitied rather than pillared. He did the dread deeds, she suffered them. It is just therefore to pity her, but to hate him. But if it was speech which persuaded her and deceived her heart, not even to this is it difficult to make an answer in employment and to banish blame as follows. Speech is a powerful Lord, which by means of the finest and most invincible body affects the divinest works. It can stop fear and banish grief and create joy and nurture pity. I shall show how this is the case, since 9. It is necessary to offer proof to the opinion of my hearers. I both deem and define all poetry as speech with meter, fearful shuddering and tearful pity and grievous longing come upon its hearers, and at the actions and physical sufferings of others in good fortunes and in evil fortunes. Through the agency of words, the soul is wont to experience a suffering of its own. But come, I shall turn from one argument to another.
Okay, wait, somebody else take over now.
Okay. Sacred incantations sung with words are bearers of pleasure and banishers of pain. For merging with opinion in the soul, the power of the incantation is wont to beguile it and persuade it and alter it by witchcraft. There have been discovered two arts of witchcraft and magic. One consists of errors of soul, and the other of deceptions of opinion. All who have and do persuade people of things do so by molding a false argument. For if all men on all subjects had both memory of things past and awareness of things present, and foreknowledge of the future, speech would not be similarly similar, since as things are now, it is not easy for them to recall the past, nor to consider the present, nor to predict the future. So that on most subjects, most men take opinion as counselor to their soul. But since opinion is slippery and insecure, it casts those employing it into slippery and insecure successes. What cause then prevents the conclusion that Helen, similarly, against her will, might have come under the influence of speech, just as if ravished by the force of the mighty? For it was possible to see how the force of persuasion prevails. Persuasion has the form of necessity, but it does not have the same power. For speech constrained the soul, persuading it which it persuaded, both to believe the things said and to approve the things done. The persuader, like a constrainer, does the wrong, and the persuaded, like the constrained, in speech is wrongly charged. To understand that persuasion, when added to speech, is wont also to impress the soul as it wishes, one must study. First, the words of astronomers who, substituting opinion for opinion, taking away one but creating another, make what is credible and unclear seem true to the eyes of opinion. Then, second, logically necessary debates in which a single speech, written with art but not spoken with truth, bends a crowd and persuades. And third, the verbal disputes of philosophers in which the swiftness of thought is also shown, making the belief in an opinion subject to easy change. The effect of a speech upon the condition of the soul is comparable to the power of drugs over the nature of bodies. For just as different drugs dispel different discretions from the body, and some bring an end to disease and others to life, so also is the case of speeches. Some distress, others delight, some cause fear, others make the hearers bold, and some drug and bewitch the soul with a kind of evil persuasion.
Okay, Ron, why don't you take over?
It has been explained that if she was persuaded by speech, she did not do wrong, but was unfortunate. I shall discuss the fourth cause in the fourth passage, for if it was love which did all these things, there will be no difficulty in escaping the charge of the sin which is alleged to have taken place. For the things we see do not have the nature which we wish them to have, but the nature which each actually has. Through sight, the soul receives an impression even in its inner features. When belligerents and war buckle on their warlike accoutrements of bronze and steel, some designed for defense, others for offense, if the sight sees this, immediately it is alarmed, and it alarms the soul, so that often men flee panic-stricken from future danger, as though it were present. For strong as is habit of obedience to the law, it is ejected by fear resulting from sight, which coming to a man causes him to be indifferent both to what is judged honorable because of the law and to the advantage to be deprived from victory. It has happened that people, after having seen frightening sights, have also lost presence of their mind for the present moment. In this way, fear extinguishes and excludes thought, and many have fallen victim to useless labor and dread diseases and hardly curable madness. In this way, the sight engraves upon the mind images of things which have been seen, and many frightening impressions linger, and what lingers is exactly analogous to what is spoken. Moreover, whenever pictures perfectly create a single figure and formed from many colors and figures, they delight the sight. While the creation of statues and the production of works of art furnish a pleasant sight to the eyes. Thus it is natural for the sight to grieve for some things and long for others, as much love and desire for many objects and figures is engraved in many. If therefore the eye of Helen, pleased by the figure of Alexander, presented to her eager soul, desired to contest love, what wonder, if being a god, love has the divine power of the gods? How could a lesser being reject and refuse it? But if it is a disease of human origin and a fault of the soul, it should not be blamed as a sin, but regarded as an affliction. For she came, as she did come, and caught the net of fate, not by the plans of the mind and by the constraints of love, not by the devices of art.
Okay, I'll take over here. How then can one regard blame of Helen as just, since she is utterly acquitted of all charge, whether she did what she did through falling in love, or persuaded by speech, or ravished by force, or constrained by divine constraint? I have by means of speech removed disgrace from a woman. I have observed the procedure which I set up at the beginning of the speech. I have tried to end the injustice of blame and the ignorance of opinion. I wish to write a speech which would be a praise of Helen and a diversion to myself. Okay, so what I want you all to do with this, right, first, right, figure out who's going to do what here. And I want you to try to pull out of this what you think Gorgias's actual beliefs are, right? What does he believe about speech and the power of speech? And then I want you to compare that to the argument that Gorgias has with Socrates in Plato's dialogue, right? And figure out whether or not Gorgias and his ideas are dangerous to the state.
Who wants to be the spokesperson?
I want to be the devil's advocate.
Okay?
I guess I'll be the spokesperson.
All right, so you are general assistant then, Ron. Help where needed.
Okay, so on this one he says persuasion is like an affliction, and that you can't be blamed for being persuaded, especially for, you can't be blamed for being persuaded. And then this one, he talks about how persuasion, at the very end he talks about how rhetoric should be used sparingly, not so, it shouldn't be used against friends, definitely, and it shouldn't be used too much. So he believes, I guess he believes in rhetoric, but he doesn't think it should be used, in an evil way, I guess. He also doesn't think that people should, he wants to divide his beliefs from between these two, so not put them together.
Tell them, not me.
Oh. Don't put them together. What do you have now?
But just some things to talk about, that somebody can't be blamed for being persuaded, and then people use rhetoric, but not used in an evil way.
One thing I want to remind you all to do too is cite which passages you're getting this stuff from, right? So at least be able to point to some specific evidence in both texts for what your arguments are.
So the first one's from
No, the first one's from this one.
yeah, we'll just call that the main one.
Do you want specific quotations?
At least point to a page number and then
Quotes,
you,
just like,
yeah, but point to a page number and be able to identify the quote if I ask for it.
so this is where you get that persuasion one. Was that from the last section?
Persuasion as an affliction, yeah.
So I'm just putting after that
page 42.
42.
And then
For book.
he says, such is the nature and power of the art of rhetoric, and yet Socrates' rhetoric should be used like any other competitive art, not against everyone. So 129. So that's why I think he's not guilty.
You got anything else up? Remember what I was talking about, there's nature of things. I was trying to get about a week or a week ago, when it's like going back and forth like that.
Where?
Page 40. I think it's like somewhere 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there.
Oh, for it is the nature of things, not for the strong to be hindered by the weak, but for the weaker he will strong by the strong.
Look at the first sentence of 8. 8. And then the subsection.
Oh wait, since our basic consensus is that he's guilty, I have to come up with, or wait, you said he's not guilty.
You gotta come up with.
So I have to come up with how he's guilty.
Yeah, you have to try to come up with a counter argument to them, right?
I thought he wasn't guilty. I just, in my head, I thought that their default was always going to be. I didn't think about that.
Uh-huh. So yeah, so your goal now is going to be to convict.
There you go.
So where I put like,
So I guess,
how do you want me to?
these aren't exactly paragraphs, are they? They're like verses maybe?
Yeah, they're verses on a papyrus scroll. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I should.
So Ron, since you
Verse 8 at the
don't,
beginning.
Ron, since you don't have the signed roll in the group, why don't you help Brandon?
Yeah, that's
And
what I was
yeah.
I'm struggling. I was looking for the wrong things.
So the two of you are trying to prove that he's not dangerous, and the two of you are going to try to prove that he is dangerous.
What do I call those where the numbers are? Because they're not all paragraphs, so I can't say paragraphs. What would I call those?
Just call them verses.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty much all ancient Greek text is written in verse, whether we regard it as prose or poetry.
Was she persuaded by God? Or what happened?
Well, okay, so what's going on there is essentially the ancient Greek view of fate and its role in human affairs, right? That fate is represented by three goddesses, one of whom spins out the thread of your life when you're born, the second of whom measures it, and the third of whom cuts it at the end, right? And fate is all powerful, right? Even the other gods have to bow to it. So if something is fated to happen to you, it's going to happen no matter what you do to avoid it, right? So like the Oedipus story, for example, is an example of that, where he tries to, his father, when he's born, tries to avoid having him grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. But then by tossing him out in the woods to die, he ends up bringing about exactly that fate, right?
So you can't blame someone for fate.
Yeah, you can't blame someone for something if it's fated to happen. Yep.
Why couldn't we thought something?
So does that mean like anything that ever happens, it's not their fault?
To an extent. The Greeks tended to allow, in cases that were ambiguous, to allow fate to take its course, right? So for example, if you had somebody who was a kind of undesirable person, but you couldn't actually convict them of a crime, you just put them outside someplace where they're likely to die. And if they survive, it's fate, right? And just because something is fated to happen doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen in the expected way, right? So whatever you do you do have some wiggle room. Whatever you do to try to avoid it is probably just going to end up bringing that fate about.
So are those three goddesses? They're goddesses, right?
Yeah.
So it talks about here how she's they talk about her lineage, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I think it's a human fault. Persuasion is like a more way to control humans, you know?
Okay, yeah. And that can be a kind of bridge between the way Gorgias is presented in Plato's piece, right, and the way in Gorgias' own arguments here. Like what he has to say about the power of persuasion and the power of speech. But the way he presents speech in the Encomium of Helen, right, like even as he is kind of showing that Helen maybe isn't to be blamed for the events that lead to the beginning of the Trojan War, right? What is he also showing about speech? If speech is what caused Helen to go off with Paris and leave her husband, what was the cause of the Trojan War then?
Speech.
And what is Gorgias a teacher of?
Rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
verse 3, he talks about,
So what exactly am I trying to prove him guilty
talks about her.
of being like dangerous in persuasion?
Yeah, teaching a kind of dangerous doctrine that is going to undermine the state.
I think that I kind of have some, I think I kind of got some.
Okay.
If you do, tell me, check out the guilty side.
He's like agreeing to everything, so it's hard to catch him.
So he talks about her lineage and suggests that she may not be
He
half
asks
God, but
him, he asks,
she may be full.
first before he asks him.
And then in verse 19, she talks about how
He gets him to agree that his sort of persuasion.
We're at 19.
First he gets him to,
which is the very last page.
first he gets him to
like
agree that
where
there
you're
are
at
different
19.
types of
But if it is a disease
persuasion.
of human
Okay.
origin
There-
and a fault of the soul, it should not be blamed as a sin, but
Oh,
regarded
yeah.
as a
Euclid's
Oh,
recall
yeah,
that
and three
Uh-huh.
is talking about
so he said,
lineage about how
She
she's
is
not
could
that
be
she's full human.
you would agree that
And
you,
that
that type of
She's a
persuasion
human for.
would end up in
Yeah.
some sort of category, and he asked
She's
him
a
what his
human
category
organ and a
would be.
fall of the soul
Uh-huh.
should not be weighed as a
He
sin,
says, law and order.
but
And he
regarded as
said,
afflictions.
Socrates asked him, he would have himself develop views
And he also talks about
in a hypothesis in a given state.
Uh-huh.
And then after saying that, he asks if having learned something and having believed something is the same thing, and he states that he's getting people to think that they have learned something when in reality they just have believed in something.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I think
That's why it's
I think you're getting something. There's a distinction between knowledge and belief, right?
Yeah.
And what does Gorgias's style of speech give people?
The thought that they know something indefinitely, when in reality it's something that they just very strongly believe in.
Yeah, and then later on down that page, I think, right, he agrees that the kind of speech he teaches is the kind of argument, the kind of speech that just gives belief, right? Not knowledge.
So he's always saying that like rhetoric can convince people what you
So it would be a
Yeah.
good statement to say that it would be, he would be guilty of making it dangerous by making people feel as if they've learned, when in reality they just believe.
Yeah, all he's doing is persuading. Yeah, good. And I think you try to connect this to what he says a little bit further on, maybe about going around with his brother, the physician, and then who would get elected state physician, right? The doctor or the rhetorician. I think that'll help you guys make. Looking at that stuff will help you guys make the guilty case. How's Team Innocent doing here?
I've got a lot of evidence. Not a lot of, and especially evidence from here. I don't have much from here.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of this, I sometimes feel like Socrates is just doesn't give him really a chance.
Sure. Yeah. Socrates is trying to trap him, right?
Yeah, and it's hard to.
Yeah, he's trying to get him to admit that his particular art is basically bullshit, right?
And it's hard to find evidence in that.
Yeah.
And he only lives to defend himself once.
It doesn't even seem like he's listening to him, because he just says the same thing. He either says certainly, very true, I think so,
Right.
very clearly,
Yeah.
every single time, or just yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Gorgias keeps agreeing with Socrates' assessments, right? And affirming, the things that Socrates says about it. There are a couple of moments where he tries to explain himself a few times, right? But he doesn't really push back all that much. At least not in the excerpt that we have here.
I kind of got the better side of this one. Just agreeing to any and everything.
Yeah, but this wasn't written by him, was it?
No.
It was written by someone else.
Now, many of the things that Plato attributes to Gorgias, many of the ideas that he attributes to Gorgias, are ideas that the historical Gorgias would have agreed with, but not all of them. There are a couple of things that Gorgias himself probably would have pushed back on had he been given the chance.
Got some here in 6. It says, it is the nature of things, or it is the nature. Not for the strong to be hindered by the weak, but for the weaker to be pulled and drawn by the stronger. So perhaps persuasion is a tool used by the strong to control the weak. Of course, in this he's talking about, God's controlling humans, but stronger humans controlling the weaker.
And that's an argument that could kind of go either way there, right?
But he does say that it should be used properly, not abused.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, does Gorgias regard speech as, in and of itself, good or evil? It's powerful, right?
Yeah, but he never said.
But yeah, it's a morally neutral tool. In his view, right? Probably not. In fact, I will say definitely not in Plato's view.
He uses evil.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get to we'll get to this in a minute. But like part of the idea, like part of the conflict here is that these two thinkers have very different views of reality.
From the part where he's talking about rhetoric being bad on 128 and the top of 129. So like the very, very last two lines, and if you start reading down on 129, you can see where he's talking about people that are really good with rhetorication have the power of getting themselves chosen, meaning to chosen for something, chosen to do whatever. And it says, thus the nature and power of rhetoric. And right above that says, for he can speak more persuasively to the multitude than any of them and on any subject.
Right. So I think that's what makes him kind of innocent is he's giving examples of how it can be used improperly.
You want me to put that down or not?
That's something. That's around, we talked about such as the nature and power of the art of rhetoric, and yet Socrates' rhetoric should be used like any other competitive art, not against everybody.
Is there something problematic, though, about the idea of, say, two people running for the position of state physician, and the guy who's actually a doctor loses to the guy who's an effective speaker, but doesn't know anything about medicine?
It shows a fault in humans, I think.
Okay, so you think that Gorgias would argue that the problem is not with the speaker who made a persuasive speech, but with the listeners who followed along?
I have a counter argument.
Okay.
As someone who entangles with this amount of power, knowing that you have this amount of power, as much as he stated that he knows how powerful what he can do is, knowing that you have this much power over a large amount of people, would you not be in fault for organizing or practicing that power?
Yeah. If the power you teach, right,
Right.
gets somebody completely unqualified for a position into that position, right? Does that not make you dangerous?
Because it would be different if he didn't know the effects of what he said and how it affected people or how they thought. But he admits multiple times in the statement that he knows when he states a certain thing or makes people believe a certain thing that he's doing that.
Yeah. I mean, he says right in the beginning of his argument, right, that rhetoric is the most powerful art, right?
Yeah, but can you be blamed for the effect something you teach has on someone?
It's not that he is keeping it to himself, he is a teacher of this, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
He's a teacher, and he's sharing the good and the bad of it. But also, what it does to someone, he can't be blamed for. I don't think he can be blamed for that.
Yeah, and I think Gorgias.
Because he's
Yeah.
just passing the information on, he's not, like, it's up to that other person once the information is passed to them what they do with it. That no longer becomes his responsibility.
Yeah.
Because that person's been taught the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the argument that Gorgias makes, right, in
It's
Plato's
not good and bad,
dialogue.
it's up to them what to do.
Yeah, that it's on the individual students
Yeah.
to decide what to do with this power, right, whether to use it for good or for ill.
And he also says which one he thinks. How he says how it should be used. So if they go against him,
It's obvious that he's on the good side of it, that he still teaches both.
In fact, Gorgias's specialty, the thing that he was noted for being particularly good at, and that people came to him to learn, was how to make an unpopular or apparently weak argument seem strong, right? So the encomium of Helen is actually an example of that, right? You're taking this figure who's reviled in Greek literature as a betrayer and as the cause of a massive hero-slaying war that essentially destroyed a civilization, and instead shifting the blame away from her, right, onto another character. So taking an unpopular position there, right, and making it seem reasonable.
here it says that she was abducted, so they blame her for being abducted.
Well, different accounts treat the idea a little bit differently. There are some accounts in which she is literally abducted. Most of those are later accounts, and in most of the early ones, she willingly goes with Paris. But yeah, there are a number of different versions of that story. All right, so let me give y'all a little bit of context for all of this, and then we'll see if we can come to a verdict by the time we finish up here, right? So the accusation that I've made here is actually a little bit ironic, because this is basically what Socrates was accused of and convicted of and executed for himself later on, right? Gorgias was never put on trial for anything. So Gorgias belonged to a school of thinkers in 5th century BCE Athens called the Sophists. So the word sophist comes from the Greek word sophia, which means wisdom. So a sophist literally is a wise one. And they were teachers primarily of rhetoric, right? Primarily of persuasion through speech. In addition to Gorgias, they included figures like Protagoras, Isocrates, Antiphon, and Hippias. We don't really know that much about what the Sophists actually believed because very few of their writings have survived, right? Plato and his followers basically kind of washed them away. And so we only really know very much, most of what we know about them is based on what their enemies said about them. So what we can discern from what writings we do have from the Sophists is that they believed that ultimate truth was unknowable. Right? That you could never know the absolute truth for sure. And the closest human beings could come was reasonable belief. Created through persuasive speech. Now, Plato and his teacher Socrates have an entirely different set of beliefs about the nature of reality. Are any of you familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave? Have any of you ever heard of this before? Okay, so Plato sets up a situation in his major work, The Republic, which is about setting up an ideal government. He has Socrates ask his students to imagine that all human beings are prisoners chained up in a cave. All right, so here we have our cave. And we have some prisoners chained up on one end of it, right? Their heads are braced so they can only look forward at the back of the cave. And on the back of the cave, they see these big shadows that are always in motion. Now, unbeknownst to the prisoners in the cave, there's a kind of walkway elevated behind them where there's a fire lit and a couple of other guys waving puppets around that are casting shadows on the back wall, right? So as long as you're chained in this cave, the only things you know are those shadows, right? Now, what is the relationship between a shadow and an object?
Shadow is what it seems to be.
Yeah, the shadow is only a seeming created, it's a trick of the light, right? Whereas the object itself is the real thing. So all we're seeing when we're in the cave are shadows of things, or imitations of things. Now then, if somebody manages to break free and escape the cave, they'll find a world of bright sunlight outside, which initially will be painful, Because if your eyes are adjusted to a dark cave, right, suddenly being hit, I mean, imagine like, how you feel when somebody, your instructor turns the lights off and then turns them back on, right? Think about that, but about 30 times more intense. But then once your eyes adjust to the light and you get used to it, you realize, oh, this is what's real, right? This is what's true. But when you try to go back and tell the other people in the cave who are, just used to looking at shadows, they think you're nuts, they ignore you, and they go back to talking about which shadows are the best, right? So the cave, and the back wall in particular, represents the world of belief and opinion, which Plato argues most of us are stuck in, where the only things we know are imitations of real ideas or real objects. And the world outside the cave is the world of truth. So Plato believes that truth is knowable. There is such a thing as absolute truth, and that we can get there through a process he calls dialectic. Dialectic is essentially a philosophical dispute between two or more viewpoints, right? So instead of monologuing like the Sophists tend to do, a philosopher practicing dialectic instead has a conversation with somebody who has a different view. And through this conversation, they aim to arrive at truth. So, dialectic cuts out all emotional appeals. It should be based entirely on reasoned argument. And there are two possible outcomes of a dialectic conversation, right? So you have, one voice making proposals, right, or theses. Another making counter proposals, or antitheses. And in the end, you either end up with the refutation and rejection of false positions, right? Through going back and forth, the two philosophers figure out, okay, what's true and what's false, and reject the false. Or a synthesis of both positions, right? They find some things that they can agree on. And they figure, okay, since we can both accept these propositions, right, this must be truth. So Socrates is trying really more to do the first, or Plato is trying to have Socrates do the first in this argument between Socrates and Gorgias, right? All he's really trying to do is refute what he believes are false positions, rather than to find some sort of compromise between himself and Gorgias. Basically, what he's trying to do is make Gorgias look stupid, right? Which is, when I read, these old Socratic dialogues, it's kind of amazing to me that they didn't execute Socrates sooner, because the dude was apparently so bloody annoying. But let's get back to, for a moment, your analysis of these two positions. So let's hear the case for Gorgias's innocence.
Okay, so, first, Gorgias.
Do you need a minute?
Okay, so he is a teacher of rhetoric. He's a rhetorician.
Rhetorician, yep.
Rhetorician.
Mm-hmm.
So he's teaching it.
Yes.
He's not actually. Well, he may practice it, but we don't know if he does practice. He teaches it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing he says is he talks about how it could possibly be a human affliction, persuasion is, and that you can't always blame someone for being persuaded.
Okay.
Page 42.
Mm-hmm.
Also, verse 8.
Okay.
And that speech is powerful,
Mm-hmm.
and that it shouldn't be. He also says it's powerful. It shouldn't be used against friends. It should be used sparingly. That is in page 129. Such is the nature and
Okay.
power of our rhetoric.
Okay. So he's at least making the argument that he tries to teach it responsibly.
Yes, and he also gives an example of an improper use of rhetoric that
Mhm.
would ultimately hurt society
Mm-hmm.
as a way of illustrating improper usage, and that it should prevent his students from using it in that manner.
Okay.
And he also talks about how persuasion, naturally, the strong will rule the weak, and the weak will be attracted to the strong.
Uh-huh.
So possibly persuasion is a tool of the strong, and that persuasion is I'd say a natural tool,
Okay.
and that he can't be blamed for a natural tool.
And Plato's own student, Aristotle, will end up making a similar argument to that, that people are naturally persuaded by the better argument, or the morally better argument, right? So that arguments that appeal to our better, to our sense of truth are more likely to prevail than lying arguments, which I think is a principle that Gorgias would probably agree with. All right. Now, prove to us that Gorgias is in fact guilty and must be made to drink the hemlock.
Okay. Start off my argument, I want to say, I agree with his, so it was hard to do. Because I thought I was going to be the one trying to prove that he wasn't guilty.
But this is the thing, like one thing that you need to try to learn to do as writers and thinkers is to inhabit multiple positions, right? So that's part of what we're trying to do here. All right, go ahead.
So, okay. Begin my argument. I said that he continuously throughout the whole time he's being questioned, he agrees with most of what Socrates has to say about rhetorics and rhetoricians. So first, he agrees that the power of persuasion can be dangerous, and he states that rhetorician uses the power of persuasion, and that he teaches it to people, and he tries to put more off the blame onto the people that he teaches.
Okay.
Like if I teach someone how to do something, it's their choice to use it how they may. But I feel say you teach someone how to use a knife, and then they use that instead of going and cut a steak, they go and cut someone's head off. It's teaching them how to use a knife.
If I teach you how to stab a person in the jugular, and then you go and do it, would you have been able to do that if I hadn't taught you?
Yeah. So he's kind of like putting more of the blame and saying like, well, I didn't tell them
Uh-huh.
to do this. I just taught them how to.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like that kind of puts guilt on him, and then he admits that in exact words he says false truths. Oh, okay. He admits that there are false truths as well as true,
Mm-hmm.
and that he teaches this. And that there are different types of rhetorics, same as, or he compares it to, or no, Socrates compares it to art. In the
Mhm.
same way that an artist might draw or make different things, a rhetoric would teach or persuade on different things, and he agrees
Mhm.
with that.
Yeah.
And he says that his version of rhetorician is teaching. He says that it's teaching. I don't know what he said. I know it was law and something. And
Okay. This is the part that we were looking at earlier, right? He's talking about knowledge and belief.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So
I've read page 127. Yep.
Basically the basis of my argument is that although he can claim that giving the power of persuasion to others doesn't make him directly guilty,
Mhm.
he could be guilty by association, because if he knows that the power of his teachings is as powerful as he states multiple times or agrees with,
Uh-huh.
he knows exactly what he's doing, what he's teaching, and the power that he's giving to other people. So if he chooses to practice and or teach other people how to practice that amount of power, he should be held responsible for whatever happens.
Okay. And we don't have enough people here to do a real vote on this, but the way this would have worked in 5th century Athens, right, is that everybody in the assembly, which would have included every male freeborn citizen of Athens. Interesting fact, Plato was a citizen, Gorgias was not. Gorgias belonged to a class, at most of the Sophists actually belonged to a class of people called metics, who were foreign-born. Foreign-born meaning in many cases simply they were born in other Greek city-states, just not in Athens. And the metics, even though they made up about 1/3 of the male population at the time Plato was born, did not have the rights of citizens. Had relatively
So
few
can they be
legal rights.
tried?
Oh yes, they could still be tried and banished, but they could not. They couldn't vote on their own or each other's fate. Let's wrap up by looking at the reading questions for next time. So you've probably noticed, and I think I've mentioned, that just about all of the readings we're doing in this class are in some level about social responsibility, right? And so one of the reasons I wanted you to read the Gorgias was, to think about, like what the responsible, Jesus, stop it. What the responsible use of speech and rhetoric is, right? When we look at Seneca for next time, we're going to be talking about what's the responsible way to pursue our educational priorities. So it'll be similar in some ways to Martha Nussbaum, but this is from an ancient world perspective.